Elders aren't just supposed to shepherd the flock. They're not just there to serve the congregation, to be a listening ear in times of hardship. Apparently, elders are also supposed to be surreptitiously monitoring the spirituality of eligible young men in their congregation. That's part of the job description, I guess, of an elder, is to spy on young men who are Jehovah's Witnesses. Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Attic. Today I'm going to be continuing my review of the 2024 Declare the Good News Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses, this time taking a look at the talks and videos shown to attendees on the Saturday of the three-day convention. Now, as with all of these reviews, there is a lot of material for us to wade through, so without further ado, let's roll the first clip.
Then Herod, seeing that he had been outwitted by the astrologers, flew into a great rage.
No! No!
And he sent out and had all the boys in Bethlehem and in all its districts killed from 2 years of age and under, according to the time that he had carefully ascertained from the astrologers.
Charming, wasn't it? So, we've just been watching a scene from the feature Bible drama, The Good News According to Jesus. This is a series that has been much heralded and anticipated by the governing body. In annual meeting after annual meeting, they've been whipping up anticipation for this live action series depicting the life of Jesus, or in this case, events shortly preceding the life of Jesus. I'm going to be honest, the series so far is not living up to the billing. I mean, the production levels themselves generally seem to be improving, and of course you get special effects thrown in here and there. All of that's, not so bad. But the problem Jehovah's Witnesses have always had with these, you could say, high production dramas is, I think, just a fundamental lack of creativity, because they are bound by the constraints of the dogma. They can only ever produce films that appease the religion rather than films that entertain. So they don't really have much creative license. And in the case of this particular series, one obvious criticism that I can point to is the constant narration, the constant reading of the Bible verses while the scenes are unfolding. It's just distracting. And it goes against the tried and tested tool of show, don't tell. You show people and you let them form their own conclusions. You don't tell them what they're seeing. If you tell people what they're seeing or how they're supposed to interpret what they're seeing, they're just not going to find it entertaining. And to be honest, it's quite infantilizing, isn't it? So that's the obvious problem, or one obvious problem, with this new series. Another is its inclusion of scenes that, shall we say, parents might not want their children to see. So this is The Good News According to Jesus, Episode 1, The True Light of the World, Part 2. And it's, of course, dealing with the decree of Herod to have babies killed. And it's showing soldiers going out, swords brandished. It's showing at least one child who's about to be killed. And it's showing you the blood-curdling scream of the mother as her child is being killed. Do parents really want their children? I mean, bear in mind, children of all ages are expected to watch this. So there's no lower age limit when it comes to convention audiences. So that there will be babies in the audience being expected to watch this. And of course, the organization has already responded in its JW broadcasting content to concerns raised by Jehovah's Witness parents in this regard.
We might mention that we've had just a few parents write in expressing concern that some of our videos depict scenes that could have an effect on children who've been protected from anything even hinting at an act of violence. Be assured that we'll continue to be sensitive to the feelings of you parents when we produce a video that's based on a Bible account that includes descriptions of warfare or other incidents of violent actions. We'll do so with care, while not ignoring the powerful details depicted in the inspired Word of God.
So that was from the May 2020 JW broadcasting episode. Stephen Lett there telling Jehovah's Witness parents who'd gone so far as to write in to the organization. That's how distressed they were by some of the footage being shown at the conventions, specifically in the Bible dramas. And he's saying we will continue to be sensitive to the needs of parents. I suppose my question would be, how can you be sensitive to the needs of parents when overwhelmingly those involved in the production of these Bible dramas are not parents themselves? Now, that's not to say that you can't have some sensitivity whether you have children or don't have children, but I think it does help if you have at least some parents involved in the production. And a criticism I've long had of the governing body and the organization when it comes to the production of their, I'll just say it, propaganda, is that they can't call upon parental experience. They are driven by an agenda which is, let's drive home our teachings. They're not really thinking, or they cannot really think like a parent would think when it comes to depicting Bible accounts of violence. And I think that shows very clearly in this new installment of the Jesus drama.
Well, by setting realistic and small spiritual goals, it helped me to see clearly the path that I need to take to get to some of my more major goals, like getting baptized and thanks to Jehovah, not regular pioneering.
Very nice. Now, you mentioned some small goals. What were some of those smaller goals?
Well, for instance, I love reading, but I noticed that a lot of my time through the day could get spent lost in a book. So I decided that one time a day when I would normally read a fictional novel, I would instead read the Bible. And this helped me to develop a good routine of personal study and draw me closer to Jehovah.
Excellent. Thank you, Sophie. Nice sacrifice there.
Yes, nice sacrifice there, Sophie. So we've just been watching some quite awkward and cringeworthy interviews that were included in the baptism talk from the Saturday morning. The speaker you see there is Keith Bradley from the Minnewaska congregation, and he is interviewing, in this particular instance, Sophie Boguette, who he announced as having been baptized for about a year. And Sophie, along with another Jehovah's Witness lady, Sophie is giving examples of sacrifices that she has made in order to be a Jehovah's Witness. And I'm not sure this is something that anyone should be proud of. The fact that she is making herself less literate for the sake of the good news, for the sake of her Jehovah's Witness beliefs. She's giving up on literature. She's giving up on reading novels so that she can devote more time to reading the Bible. I mean, you decide for yourself, folks, whether that's a worthwhile sacrifice to make. I would argue that this is the sort of sacrifice that can only be celebrated by a cult with zero self-awareness when it comes to the stifling and regressive impact it has on the development of young people.
Now, in the following video, notice how one sister has learned from her past mistakes and moved ahead in Jehovah's service.
The feeling of guilt is so heavy. Can I ever be part of Jehovah's organization and feel good? Can I feel clean? And because the guilt made me feel like I wasn't. I would pray to Jehovah and just plead with him. I would journal how I was feeling, and then I would do the personal study. And when I was having a bad day, a real down day, I would look and see, oh yeah, this is how Jehovah feels. I felt a change in me when I studied about the ransom. Jesus died for everyone, even people who don't serve him. Then he died for me too. Feeling guilty can make you want to isolate. But I knew that was dangerous because there's no growth, there's no encouragement from anyone. Reaching out and associating with the brothers and sisters really helped me not be so self-consumed. When I was able to comment again at meetings, I started out small by saying like one word answers, and then maybe a longer answer or using a scripture. It gave me something to be proud of. Going in the ministry really helped me because I was talking about the wonderful hope of the future that Jehovah gives, and it was building my faith along with helping others. When you help others, it makes you happy. When I look back from where I was, feeling so guilty to where I am now, I really see the wisdom in Jehovah and his discipline. And it makes me feel proud. I'm very happy.
Sherry Combs there, feeling very happy and hopefully less guilty these days, having received a good old dose of discipline from Jehovah's organization. So this is a video that gets shown as part of the Saturday afternoon symposium, Use the Good News to Defeat Bad News. This particular part is titled A Troubled Conscience. The speaker that we saw at the beginning was Marcus West, who is a Bethelite from Wallkill. And yet they're showing this video, again, missing the point, I feel, and showing a lack of self-awareness, because what I'm picking up from this video is that life as a Jehovah's Witness will in many cases entail crushing guilt, which is what Sherry seems to be describing here. She's been through this process of discipline for some kind of wrongdoing that is unspecified, and she's describing going through quite a traumatic phase in her life. How is this supposed to make being a Jehovah's Witness something that's appealing? If you're sat in the convention audience as a newcomer and this is your first experience of Jehovah's Witnesses, the resounding message from this particular video is brace yourself for feelings of crushing guilt and lack of self-worth.
Now, in the following video, notice how one brother defeated the bad news.
especially at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also as the war in Ukraine started. I watched a great deal of news reports, whether on TV, the computer, on my smartphone. When you watch the news, you see many pictures that simply haunt you. I noticed that this was not good for me, and it bothered me more and more. Besides, it was too time-consuming. After a while, you begin to realize that you are somehow consumed by your thoughts. I realized that it was not simply information that I was processing, but my feelings were stirred. And how easily you can lose focus. You don't notice it straight away, but I realized that for me, it was simply too much news. The only solution was to be occupied with Jehovah's news, the news which is good for me, Jehovah's promises. What really helped me was to focus on strengthening my trust in Jehovah and concentrating more on the preaching work. It brought me closer to Jehovah and gave me inner peace and calm. Many people think their future depends on what they see in the news. However, it does us so much good to help others understand that their future depends on something completely different, that is Jehovah's kingdom. And as a result, a wonderful future awaits them.
Yes, a wonderful future awaits them if they embrace Jehovah's kingdom. If they don't, not so wonderful. We've just been hearing there from Julian Schultz, a Jehovah's Witness from Germany. He's appearing in a video that gets shown in another part of the symposium, Use the Good News to Defeat Bad News. This particular symposium item, Current Events. It doesn't need spelling out too much why this is a bit of a messed up video. I mean, surely Jehovah's Witnesses can decide for themselves whether they want to watch the friggin' news or not. You know? Do they really need a video essentially telling them every which way, don't watch the news, it's going to be too depressing, instead do the preaching work? This is a glaring example of where Jehovah's Witnesses are lacking in basic freedoms, or at the very least, they are being coerced and persuaded to not do simple things that non-Jehovah's Witnesses take for granted and can quite frankly make decisions on for themselves. And if you're watching this as someone who's never been one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you're wondering, why are they telling their followers to not watch the news? Look, I suppose you'd have to ask them what their real reasons are. They claim it's just to help people feel more positive and I guess help people with their mental health. But I think it doesn't take too much to read between the lines here and see that there is utility in a group with such a terrible reputation as Jehovah's Witnesses turning their followers away from the news media. Because let's face it, the chances of Jehovah's Witnesses turning on the news and seeing reporting that exposes the group's harmful teachings and policies is increasing almost year on year. So I don't think the motives here are entirely pure. I think it's actually quite self-serving. This is a group that is terrified of its followers learning the truth about its practices.
In the following dramatization, notice how a couple who are studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses, armed with this appreciation that the angels are backing their work, are motivated to begin preaching.
Good. So that's the end of lesson 22. Take a look at this week's goal.
Think of one person with whom you could share the good news. Think about what to say, how to say it, and when to say it.
Isn't that technically 3 goals?
You'll do great.
Let's close with a prayer.
Well, Jocelyn wants me to do this meditation seminar. You guys are into that, right?
Well, we were.
But I'm like, I can't deal with that right now. With everything happening in the world, inflation is killing my business. I just have bigger problems to think about.
But what's bigger than inner peace?
Making payroll.
Your brother is a Neanderthal.
Look, it's not my fault the world's a mess. What do you guys think?
So, what did you say?
You totally froze.
It's a big step to share what you've learned.
It's just for us. Our spirituality's always been, personal.
We've never liked the idea of pushing our beliefs on others. I know we're not pushing, but...
We used to feel the same way.
I didn't think I could ever preach. I didn't even like the word preach.
How did you get over it?
Well, the more we studied, the more we came to realize that when Jesus said, "Go and make disciples," he was talking to us. It's the work that Jesus gave each one of us, personally.
Sometimes, it feels like it's too much for us.
Well, it is too much for just us. But do you remember what Jesus promised next?
I am with you.
Exactly. And he knew that sometimes it would be hard. But we have some very powerful help. Here's some homework. Take a look at Revelation chapter 14 and verse 6.
And I saw another angel flying amid heaven, and he had everlasting good news to declare to those who dwell on the earth. And this is a neat point in the research guide. It says that God's angels do not preach directly to people.
I'm so glad Blake got us to do this homework. I didn't realize mid-heaven means overhead. Help is so close.
Yeah. They're right there with us.
Jesus taught us to pray to beg the Master for more harvest workers. If that was true in the first century, how much more true is it now during our time at the end of this harvest period? So what a privilege each of us have to be one of those workers that Jesus taught us to pray for. And we can accomplish that work with eagerness if we meditate upon the fact that it's our personal responsibility to preach, and always remember that lives are at stake, ours and those of the ones we preach to as well.
Always remember that lives are at stake, ours and those of the ones that we preach to. So there's the doomsday message. They just can't help but reverting to. We're watching a symposium with the theme Eager to Declare the Good News. This particular part of the symposium, not the work of apostles only, and we've just been watching on our screens Paul Castellani. Paul Castellani has just shown a video that is part of a recurring series throughout this symposium featuring 2 characters, Aidan and Ellie, who go from being dreaded worldly people to studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses and being, you could say, model students, in other words, very, very gullible. And as we're going to see in the series, or as you will see if you watch the series, they make very, very swift progress We're going to revisit in this rebuttal one of the later videos in this series so that you'll see how they become model Jehovah's Witness preachers. But what a cringeworthy series, and again, entirely lacking in self-awareness. What's the message you're getting if you've never been a witness? I think it's really interesting to examine the portrayal of worldly people versus Jehovah's Witnesses. Aidan is portrayed as having piercings, and these piercings, as we're going to see, magically vanish when he becomes a witness. Ellie is shown when she encounters the witnesses at the carts with a yoga mat, or when she walks past the witnesses at the cart. They're both shown doing volunteer work. So apparently volunteer work isn't something you should really be doing. And if you think about it, isn't that in line, perfectly on message when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses and the way they put all of their emphasis on the preaching work, the life or death preaching work? How can you have time for volunteer work to save doomed worldly people when you should be out warning them? And even meditation, we saw there, is something that's frowned upon. Of course, Jehovah's Witnesses do something that they call meditation, but it has nothing to do with breathing exercises and finding inner peace. It's just basically analyzing the Bible and Jehovah's Witness literature and just going over and over the text and trying to find meaning and something that they can apply to their own lives. That's the Jehovah's Witness version of meditation. So really, really useful, I think, to compare the Jehovah's Witness portrayal of worldly people and just see exactly what it is that you're supposed to get rid of if you are into any of these things, such as yoga or volunteering. You'll also have seen there Ellie and Aidan have a problem with pushing their beliefs, quite rightly. I think we can all relate to that. It's just not something you should really be doing in polite conversation. Oh, I have these personal religious beliefs, you should have them too. Again, it makes sense in the context of a group where they believe lives are at stake. But for everybody that doesn't have this doomsday mindset, this mindset of everyone who's not in my religion is going to die, it's just not polite, is it, to push beliefs? So I find myself relating more, or way more, to these characters before they become, quite frankly, cult drones. I find it funny, and this is just a personal observation, Ellie is shown, and you'll see this in each of the installments of this series, Ellie is shown sketching almost everything that she's learning. Every time there's some lesson, some profound Bible truth, rather than simply writing it down, she gets a sketchbook out and she draws it. I find that quite funny and a little bit patronizing, almost suggesting that women are at an intellectual level where they can only draw, they can't write things. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm being hypercritical, but that's kind of the message I got from that. And you also see this message about the angel flying in mid-heaven. We're going to see a rather cringeworthy portrayal of this as this series unfolds.
The truth was really just blossoming. And the Georgian people reacted very well to the preaching work. Satan could see the growth, and he had a ready tool to try to stop it. Police assisted the mob to attack conventions, and there were many, many, many attacks during that time period. You could not even have a convention. It was too dangerous. Pretty well every weekend, you had a mob attack on a congregation. Children as young as 7 were attacked and beaten. It was just relentless.
You know, when they attacked our congregation, It was a terrifying moment. And I remember you had blood all over your face.
They dragged me into a crowd and the women were pulling my hair. I had long hair then. I remember one tall man took off his belt and began hitting us on the head. I asked Jehovah, how do I escape this?
In that moment, you get this feeling of fear that you might not make it out alive.
We could never tell the brothers, don't worry, in the next couple of years it'll be over. We could not. No. It was hard for them, but they simply continued. It did not deter them at all. Our brothers behaved exceedingly well. A nationwide witness was being given. And so Satan's tactic to crush the brothers did the opposite.
People began to have so many questions about why we were being attacked. And of course, we were able to use this as an opportunity to share our beliefs and give a witness. When Jehovah stands by you, along with Jesus and all their armies, no opposer will be able to stop the work that Jehovah and Jesus are directing.
And then all of a sudden, there was a change in government, and the new government did not allow the mob attacks. They took the ringleaders and arrested them. But that's not a final solution, because another government could take another position. The ultimate goal was to get some decisions from the European Court that would have a lasting effect in the country.
So we've just been watching a clip from a video that gets shown on the Saturday afternoon of the convention program. The theme of the video, how the good news is bearing fruit and increasing in all the world. I found this particular footage and story, well, it was very troubling, quite frankly, to see the scale of persecution that Jehovah's Witnesses experienced in Georgia at the start of the 21st century. Always distressing to see violence and beatings in the name of religion, including we saw there children as young as 7 reportedly being attacked. I've spoken out against violence and persecution against Jehovah's Witnesses for as long as I've been doing this work. I know some of you may not expect me to speak out against it, but I just personally very firmly believe in human rights and in our freedom to believe whatever we want to believe, whether it makes sense or not. I do, however, have to point out, as I routinely need to in these conventions, that this footage is not being put out in a balanced way that shows that there is a larger problem when it comes to religious persecution. In other words, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't shedding light on other religious minorities that get persecuted. If you were to watch only these convention videos and only Jehovah's Witness videos, you would think that Jehovah's Witnesses are the only religious minority in the world that are being persecuted. The reality is very, very different, as anyone who keeps an eye on what's going on in China with the Uyghur population will know. So I just have to make that point again, it seems. And I also think that there's some interesting and rather telling elements to this particular clip. Firstly, when you look at the fanaticism of the Christian Orthodox mob that was working in tandem, it seems, with the police to attack Jehovah's Witnesses and burn down their places of worship and cause all sorts of mayhem and violence. Doesn't this just show the end game of religious fanaticism? What we're seeing here are normal people who probably have very well-rounded morals and values. But when you add religious fanaticism into the mix, they can be made to do some terrible, terrible things. And that's, ironically, precisely the problem that we have with Jehovah's Witnesses, a group that persuades its followers to die rather than receive blood transfusions, persuades parents that it's better for their child to die refusing a blood transfusion, persuades parents that it's better to pretend that their children don't exist if when they grow up they end up getting removed from the congregation and shunned. So I wish Jehovah's Witnesses could just see the flip side on this and understand that the same sort of fanaticism that drives religions against them, or that stirs up this kind of religious hatred against them, it's the exact same fanaticism, it's the exact same capacity to take things to extremes that is a cancer at the heart of the organization that just isn't going away. And isn't it interesting as well, when reviewing this clip, again, just taking a step back and looking at it from all angles, isn't it interesting that it's Satan's world that's responsible for the persecution, and it's also Satan's world that's responsible for the cure? So it's a change of government, and the government ends up throwing these religious fanatics behind bars. And you heard there the spokesperson for the organization saying, well, of course, a new government could come in and release them, and then we'd be back to square one. So we're going to appeal to the European Court for Human Rights. Well, that is an instrument of Satan's world. I mean, the very fact that you have a court that you can appeal to, I would suggest, shed serious doubt on your claim that the whole world is under the control of Satan. If Satan is controlling all of this persecution, he's doing a really bad job. And it all reminds me of a song I wrote some time ago, thumbnail here if you want to listen to it. It's kind of a humorous song. It's called Good Things, Bad Things. And I point out this very issue, the fact that when bad things happen to Jehovah's Witnesses, they point to it as evidence that they are God's one true organization. And then when good things happen, this too is evidence that they're God's one true organization. And really, laughable though it is just worth stressing that you cannot have it both ways. Either the world is out to get Jehovah's Witnesses, or the world is coming to the rescue of Jehovah's Witnesses through its political instruments. Which is it?
Friday night to make plans. Oh, we'll definitely pray about it. Oh, okay. See ya.
This is it.
Hold on.
So yes, there's the angel flying in mid-heaven that was referred to earlier on in this series of dramatizations. We've just been watching the symposium item, Keep Preaching the Good News Wherever God Directs. It's the continuing saga of Aidan and Ellie, the worldly couple who become die-hard Jehovah's Witnesses, who are willing to do whatever it takes to reach people in far-flung areas with the good news, having given up such things as piercings, yoga mats, volunteering, and meditation. You saw again there Ellie with her sketchbook out. As you do, you know, sketching a drawing of what they will be doing in the preaching work. Look, I just find the whole series predictably cringeworthy. It's yet another great example of infantilization. Grown adults are supposed to be watching this, deriving profound meaning from these cheesy and rose-tinted portrayals of life as a Jehovah's Witness, portrayals that give no indication whatsoever of the darker, more controlling side of the group.
Young ones, would you like the best life ever on this side of Armageddon? Would you like exciting assignments? Would you like to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and run to your assignment because you know you're touching the lives of others and you are working with the best people on earth? If so, do not look for a career in this world. The work environment today is toxic. Most are just bidding their time to retire and get away from secular work. But now, on the other hand, you can be like Paul. And lastly, on this point, do not get distracted with higher education. The training that we get in Jehovah's organization makes our young ones well equipped. They've learned how to express themselves with poise. They can have a meaningful conversation with a human being rather than just a cell phone. So, of course, the universities want our children. Of course, school counselors are going to push you to go to college. You're desirable to them because of your training by Jehovah's organization, but do not let them trick you into thinking that higher education is going to make you happy.
I wanted to be able to devote everything I had to Jehovah's service. But there were times when I wanted to go to university and see how far I could go in this world. Instead of letting my feelings dictate what I should do, I decided to think things through. I thought of Paul's example. He had received education and he had riches, fame, and position. However, he said they were rubbish to him. If that was the case, I thought whatever I would be gaining would be even more worthless. I chose to work part-time as a water meter reader. I had dedicated myself to Jehovah, so I wanted to give him back my all. I was able to spend more time in Jehovah's service.
Lovely, isn't it? So, we've just been watching some clips from the final talk of the Saturday of the 2024 Declare the Good News Convention. The theme, What Will You Do for the Sake of the Good News? This is a talk that is, as you can see, directed at young ones, at young Jehovah's Witnesses. So much to say about this. First of all, I just want to comment on the speaker. His name is Stephen Bell, and he's actually on the United States branch committee based at Walk Hill, New York. Almost as soon as I heard the name, I thought, there's a name that's familiar. And then when he started speaking with his distinctive high-pitched voice, I thought, yes, I know where I've heard his voice before. I actually featured Stephen Bell on one of the very earliest videos on this channel. Here is a clip from a video that I released over 10 years ago.
And this may be something that divides a family like nothing else. It may be one of our greatest tests of our loyalty. The pain could be so great, we can say, Jehovah, what do you want from me? This is a member of my family that I love. What does Jehovah want from us when our family member is disfellowshipped? Go back to Matthew 10, and we're going to reread verse 34 and 35. He says, Do not think I came to put peace upon the earth. I came to put not peace, but a sword. For I came to cause division with a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a young wife against her mother-in-law. What does Jehovah expect out of us? Even if the situation is so painful that we have a family member who is disfellowshipped, what does he want? Loyalty. That's what Jehovah wants. Jehovah knows that this is a difficult time in our life, but he wants loyalty. We have to put him before a father, a mother, and even our children if they're disfellowshipped.
So I'm showing this clip just to make the point that Stephen Bell, United States Branch Committee member, has form for spewing controlling, manipulative cult nonsense. He's done it before on the subject of disfellowshipping, or as we're now supposed to call it, removing from the congregation. That talk obviously from 2013. And now he's doing it all over again. He is kind of Watchtower's pit bull for barking out the more obnoxious, the more damaging policies that Jehovah's Witnesses have. In this case, he is dissuading an entire generation of young Jehovah's Witnesses from higher education. He instead wants young Jehovah's Witnesses to focus on a career with the best people on earth, Jehovah's Witnesses. I think he's talking specifically about serving at Bethel, in which case my question would be, wasn't Tony Morris once among the best people on earth? Manifestly, you can't call Jehovah's Witnesses that. You're always going to have good and bad Jehovah's Witnesses. Just because they're in a religion, just because they're trying to follow what a religion directs, doesn't make them good people. So Stephen Bell's talk is verbal flatulence right from the get-go, right out of the gate. But how outrageous, how atrocious, how appalling that he should play an active role in trying to derail the futures of young people, in suggesting to them that there is no good to be found in any kind of secular career, no good to be found in bettering themselves through college and university. I find it interesting as well how he talks about our young ones or our children as though they're his, or as though they're children of the organization. No, that they don't belong to you, Stephen Bell, and they don't belong to the organization. It could be argued they don't even belong to the parents. The parents are custodians, but they are their own people, and they should be allowed to make their own decisions on their futures without having to put up with this sort of manipulative claptrap that is, quite frankly, fear-mongering, is suggesting that anything outside of the organization is rubbish. It's not worth the time of day. Why would you want to be wasting your time attaining financial stability and career development when you could be a drone for Jehovah's Witnesses? That's the message that Stephen Bell is so proudly proclaiming.
Cultivate humility. Jehovah cannot use us if we're not humble, and Jehovah's organization cannot use us. Imagine if you were building a kingdom hall and you ignored the direction of how to build it because we thought we knew better. You could have a lopsided kingdom hall. So when direction is given by Jehovah's organization, listen, accept it, and apply it. In the preaching activity, people are going to know if you are proud or humble. Humility is going to draw ones to Jehovah's organization just like the smell of food draws us to a meal. And number 5, cultivate modesty so you're an example to others. We show we're modest when we do not demand our own rights. People can watch us and tell if we're modest by our actions and by our dress and groomings.
So Stephen Bell here talking on the subject of humility and modesty. There were a couple of points I wanted to make. I'll start with the latter, where he talks there about modesty. I find it interesting how he talks about the need to not insist on one's rights.
We show we're modest when we do not demand our own rights.
So not demanding your own rights is a mark of modesty. It's something Jehovah's Witnesses should be aiming to do, not demand their own rights. Where does this place us when it comes to the right to report child abuse to the authorities, would be my question. And I'm going to read to you from a document that you can actually still download from the jw.org website, Jehovah's Witnesses' scripturally based position on child protection. If you look at paragraph 4 in that document, it reads as follows. In all cases, victims and their parents have the right to report an accusation of child abuse to the authorities. Therefore, victims, their parents, or anyone else who reports such an accusation to the elders are clearly informed by the elders that they have the right to report the matter to the authorities. Elders do not criticize anyone who chooses to make such a report. I've been saying for way too long now that this provision doesn't go far enough, precisely because of what Stephen Bell just said. Because in Jehovah's Witness culture, you're not supposed to demand your rights. You're not supposed to insist upon your rights. It would be immodest to do so. So it's not enough for elders to simply remind parents or remind victims of abuse that they have the right to report to the authorities. It's important that elders make themselves a part of the process by reporting themselves. And they can tell parents, look, you can report yourselves, you can file your own report if you want to, but we're going to be filing our own report because we have a duty to protect the flock. We have a duty to protect the congregation. But that's not the policy that Jehovah's Witnesses have. And so I think it's just worth stressing this point that Stephen Bell made. It is very much a part of Jehovah's Witness culture, and it highlights why the existing policy of Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to child protection is so flawed. I did also want to point out the really culty rhetoric from earlier on in the clip.
So when direction is given by Jehovah's organization, listen, accept it, and apply it.
Listen, accept it, and apply it. No questions asked. That's how they show their humility. I would say, isn't it a shame that it's just the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses who have to show some humility? Wouldn't it be refreshing if the leaders, if the governing body members started to show a little bit more humility and started to take a little bit more accountability for their actions, for their decisions, for their policies, which cause so much wreckage in people's lives?
There is something that can either help you greatly in the full-time service or could actually pull you out of the full-time service. So if you're a young sister and you're contemplating marriage, carefully consider how your choice of a mate could greatly affect your full-time service. For example, you fall in love with that brother. He's got the hair, groomed beard nowadays. Yeah, he's got a great job and the smile. Whew. But now what? Now what do? Here is a list of questions, young sisters, that you may want to ask. Does he have the same goals for the full-time service as you do? As you stand back and watch him, is he putting spiritual things first? You may want to observe him for a while before you get serious. Have you talked to his elders in his congregation before getting involved? What do they say about his spirituality? Have you worked with him in the ministry, and can he handle the Word of God skillfully? His comments at meetings are going to reveal something about his spirituality one way or another. As you listen to them, what do they speak to you about his spirituality? Here is a very important question. Does he show respect for women? How does he treat sisters in the congregation? Is he kind to his mother? And does he help her around the house? If he does not treat women well, he likely will not treat you well.
Stephen Bell there, giving his dating tips for young Jehovah's Witness women when it comes to potential suitors. Well, look, I think we can all agree with the last one of his list of questions. Does he treat women well? I mean, that's kind of an obvious one. I would only say that's kind of ironic coming from an organization that treats women as second-class citizens, where the only chance a woman has of doing anything on a platform is if she's cleaning it, or if she's giving some kind of presentation or demonstration at the direction of a man. Where's the respect for women in an organization that puts women in danger in cases of domestic violence, that tells women with abusive husbands, you cannot move on and remarry unless your abusive spouse admits to adultery? Where's the respect for women there? So kind of hypocritical, that last one. The others on his list of questions, I mean, it's comical in a way, but it's also quite tragic because people are going to be taking this seriously. You know, not just young women in the audience, but young men as well. I mean, this stuff equally applies. This is the level of control that is wielded on young people to the point where they're not even able to make their own decisions when it comes to dating, even already confined to dating within their religion. So it's not like they're allowed to just go out and choose the right person for them regardless of their religious background. They're already limited to choosing only from their religion. And if we want to go further, we can point out that they're also limited in choosing only heterosexual relationships. They're obviously not allowed to be gay. So there's all of this sexual repression going on already. And then on top of all of that, Stephen Bell whisks along and gives us his hot takes on what questions these young women, or by extension, again, young witnesses, should be asking. Does he have the same goals for full-time service? That's a loaded question because it's telling young witness women that they should have goals for full-time service to begin with. So, assuming that you correctly have goals for full-time service, in other words, to pioneer, to devote 50 hours per month to preaching, assuming all that to be the case already, you should then be asking, does your potential partner have the same goals as you? Is it someone who's planning to be a pioneer, or planning to be a circuit overseer, or planning to serve the organization in some advanced role? You're immediately narrowing down, aren't you, the list of potential partners. If it has to be someone with goals in full-time service. Also, are they putting spiritual things first? I guess you could say that's subjective, but it's also, again, quite controlling. The person has to display, if they're worthy of your affection, they have to be displaying their spirituality. They have to be doing it in a way that's obvious to others. It's not just something that's personal. It's not just something they can keep to themselves. They've got to display how spiritual they are. And with that in mind, young women need to be observing their potential partners. I'm imagining them kind of sneaking around in the bushes outside their partner's home or something. Is he doing his personal study? Is he engaged in family worship? Is he doing something that's remotely connected to the religion? I need to know. You know, get the old binoculars out, because we're supposed to spy on people now. And she has to talk to elders to find out what the elders think. That's surely crossing a line, isn't it? So elders aren't just supposed to shepherd the flock. They're not just there to serve the congregation, to be a listening ear in times of hardship. Apparently elders are also supposed to be surreptitiously monitoring the spirituality of eligible young men in their congregation. That's part of the job description, I guess, of an elder, is to spy on young men who are Jehovah's Witnesses, just in case they start being asked about their spirituality by Jehovah's Witness women who are interested in them. I mean, again, it's comical, isn't it? It's ridiculous, but it's also tragic, because this is, again, advice that they're supposed to follow, because Stephen Bell said it. Why would Stephen Bell say anything outrageous or outlandish? Does the young potential partner work in the ministry, and can he handle his Bible skillfully? Oh, come on. I mean, what's the metric for deciding on this? You've got to handle your Bible skillfully. Again, why are we codifying faith in this way? Why does everything have to be about an outward display of something that's supposed to be personal? It's not enough for you to be a good person when you're a Jehovah's Witness, is it? Spirituality cannot be personal, cannot be something that's just part of you. It has to be something that you display. You've got to be able to wield your Bible like a Jedi wields a lightsaber. You've got to be able to pull up verses from memory and show how skillful you are with your Bible if you want to be considered as marriage material. And comments at meetings. Do your comments at meetings show spirituality? These are all things that young women, young Jehovah's Witness women should be considering, and again, by extension, men as well. So it's just, again, tragic how much control is wielded on Jehovah's Witnesses to the point where they don't even get to decide for themselves. It's not just a case of whether they're attracted to someone. It's not just a case of whether they vibe with someone, whether their personalities are in sync, whether they enjoy spending time with each other, whether they can bring each other happiness, whether they can devote themselves to each other and be loving and understanding and compassionate towards one another. In the sad, twisted, doomsday, controlling world of Jehovah's Witnesses, it's all about displaying how spiritual you are. So those were my thoughts on the Saturday of the 2024 Declare the Good News Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. Again, this is very abridged compared to previous years, where I've devoted many, many hours to doing these rebuttals. I'm trying to keep this as succinct as possible. I hope you have found my selection appropriate. I think it perfectly showcases, again, how toxic this group is. I will be applying exactly the same scrutiny to the Sunday, the final day of the convention, so you can look forward to that rebuttal in the coming weeks. But that's about all I have time for. Thank you so much for watching.